mine. But I just got to tell you real quick, we are also joined now by Blake Cousins, the founder of Third Phase of the Moon. Blake, how are you?
Hey, doing pretty good, John. I've been listening, and welcome to the show, Mr. Colin Andrews.
Thank you very much, Blake. It's great to be talking to you.
Hey, great. You know, we got some important questions for you, and I want to get to it right now. You know, UFOs have been sighted since biblical times. When was, you know, the first report of a crop circle, the first evidence that this phenomenon exists?
I am very close to my database, but I don't have it up and running, so I can't give you the exact specific date, but I can certainly tell you that in the 90s, in the early 90s, I do believe it was 1991, actually, we started to receive a number of videos in the non-digital format at that time of orbs, UFOs, certainly unexplained, relatively small. The first range of footage that we received from individuals, separate, individuals, were of circular, light kind of objects at just above ground level, round about 18, we estimated, some work we did with the Japanese in Nihon University, revealed that these were objects of approximately 18 inches in diameter. And these objects, on the first the first three films, I'm thinking as I'm talking here, these orbs were directly over, some of them running actually through the crop circles themselves, as if they too were investigating them. It gave the very definite impression that these orbs knew their whereabouts. They were totally aware of the topography, and where we had on one of these films two crop markings could be seen from the top of the hill where the photographer was filming this, unexpected to him, of course. He was there filming two crop circles, and now suddenly out of nowhere he's got an orb, a UFO, which is stationary at about 2 feet above the ground level. At times was actually going down into the heads of the cereal crop, so you can imagine how close that was to the ground, lifting up, moving from the one complex design to the second. Actually, it's just coming to me, 1990, this particular one, and moved to the second design. It moved down into a tractor tire mark as if it was looking at the relationship or correlation in the alignment of the tractor tire marks that traverse the fields, the cereal crops in Europe, where they sow the seed and then place the fertilizers and the chemicals for the rest of the growing season, that actually cut through most of the crop circles, certainly the most complex designs. And, so these orbs demonstrated an intelligence. We didn't in those early days, interact in the form of flashing lights at them. It was that they demonstrated of their own accord that they knew where they were and what they were doing. Well, just to finish this particular example, because it is actually a very good one, it is on the internet, it's available to people to see, and I'll supply you with this, I think, when this show traverses on to YouTube, perhaps. But this particular orb moved off at speed. It picked up in speed, it rose slightly, and then abruptly away from the camera. It cleared some trees at the back of the field, and approached a tractor driver, a farmer, who was plowing an adjacent field. Now, I tracked that farmer because on film he can be seen in this footage, and as he turns his tractor at the end of this particular run across the field, he had to turn it at the boundary of his field and then run back again, as they do when they're plowing their fields, back across the expanse of the open field in front of him. This object is approaching his tractor, and he stops. You can see him stop on the footage. I later traced him and had him talk this through to me. He said, this object, this lighted object approaching. He stopped his tractor. It just went over his head. There was a buzzing sound, and it lifted up into the sky. All of this is on film. So Again, a rather long-winded response, but I'm kind of really wanted to give you substance here. This is not it never was intended, and nor would I have put my name to a very light, flinching repeat of many books. This is we've attempted, my wife and I, have attempted to bring a book together which has been thoroughly documented and researched and is solid as we can make it. There are a few areas, and I'm obviously happy to talk about them, where we're not. We leave it to the reader because it's reports that we think might be of interest, might be part of this formula, but are not as solid as the rest of the 320 pages.
You have so many instances in there, like we were saying earlier, from electronic voice phenomenon, all that stuff that links together, which I want to get to. But first, talking about the crop circles, one thing skeptics always say is it was those two guys, Doug and Dave, who admitted to all of them. And I used to get offended by that, thinking those two guys are hoaxing people into believing that these were made by some intelligence force. But your perception on these hoaxers has changed recently, these crop circle makers, correct?
Yes, yeah, very, very substantially changed. You will know because you've seen the television documentaries. You know, I primarily have been the guy that's been telling the world for many years that these could not be made by people. That certainly was my view in the early days, and I think most of what we were seeing in the early days, the more simple forms, were not made by people. But when Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, the senior citizens at that time, stepped forward in 90 and claimed to have made, as you rightly said, all the crop circles, Pat Delgado, who was my first co-author, former NASA engineer, we knew that was not true. And people will ask, as they have many times, how do you know it wasn't true? Well, after the first TV documentaries that we did, especially the one Unsolved Mysteries, that were one of the first series that came out into the US from UK, we started to get a lot of data from the US that was not known before. It wasn't being reported to, there was no reporting agency. It was going after this television program to the television studio. Cosgrove Muir, who made that series, I think perhaps still are making that series. Well, they started to forward the information to us, and we soon got to see that these were appearing in many countries and was extensive in the US too. And so it was literally not possible for those that we became aware of across the US in the same period as it was escalating in the UK and in Australia, and soon we get to see that that's what's happening in a number of other countries too. It couldn't possibly have been two elderly men who producing these around the world. We were getting peaks of 15 reports into the database, which I have here in Connecticut now, in one day. The geographic distribution made it impossible for that to have happened. But my different take on this comes from a very special, well-funded, for the first time, not funded by me, everything else has been, but the Lawrence Rockefeller in New York funded for 2 years very specific projects which I coordinated. And what happened there was that undercover people, professionals, private detective agencies who have access to other intelligence sources that I don't have, looked at people making circles. And what came out of that not only blew my mind, but it changed a great deal for me. It enforced upon me that it was very important that we include those that are being made by people and the people making them in this research, because there are common denominators that really and truly sowed the seed to the book itself. When Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley were talking to one another in the presence of a BBC producer who I knew well. In fact, I was a director of one of his companies, just a little bit ahead of what I'm about to tell you. It happened to be called Circle Vision, as it happens, but this was a senior, well-known television producer And he's wrapping up another documentary on crop circles, of which I was a small part of. And Doug Bauer, one of these senior citizens, is saying to the other, in the presence of this producer, well, you know, and this is not exactly verbatim, the actual statement is in the book, but it kind of runs like, well, you know, the strange thing that's always impressed itself upon us is, why are we doing this? It felt like something was making us do this. Now, and it was a little more extensive than that, but what it was spelling out, which shook the TV producer, it now doesn't shake me at all, because I get this on a regular basis now. Some people who are making crop circles will call this an urge. This is a thought that appears in the mind of a human being and is accepted as their own thought.
Finish your thought, and then we have a caller, and then I know Blake has another question. So go ahead, Mr. Andrews.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm sorry to run into your break there.
No problem.
It was just to say that the senior citizens felt as if they were being directed to make those that they did make, and I do accept that they did make some. In fact, I've seen photographic evidence that's on their negatives of the old 35mm negatives before it was public. So I have seen evidence that they did make some simple attempts. But the bottom line was what they were giving us right back then, but really wasn't being taken seriously, was what followed from many of those people who have been making crop circles. And it was only by talking to them, and I hadn't done for years, I consider them to be a nuisance, basically, that it became a very important part of what actually was going on.
Like you said, it's almost as if another guiding force was telling them. Painter from Kentucky, you on with us?
I'm from Georgia, but that's okay.
From Georgia. You have a question for Mr. Andrews, right?
Yes, sir. And since we've been keeping track of these crop circles and stuff, has anybody ever taken notice to see if maybe that one's closer to some of these old monolithic sites like Stonehenge and I guess it's Braebury Hill? I probably pronounced it wrong. Are they more complex the closer they get to these structures?
Yeah, you've actually put your finger on one of the very few correlations they have, Painter, and it's been me and plus a few others that have been looking very closely at that. You know, I now live in the United States, in Connecticut, but my former home, before I moved here in 1990, was very close to Stonehenge in central southern England, where 90%, just over 90% actually, of the world's total reports of crop circles come from. And it became fairly evident fairly early on that the major clustering on our planet was within almost touching distance of those large archaeological sites that you're referring to. Stonehenge has 40 miles radius from Stonehenge. It holds pretty well 90% of the world's total crop circle reports. Many of them since 89, not before that time, interestingly, but 89 onwards, got to be the hotspot inside the hotspot, and that was at the base of Silbury Hill, which is the largest man-made pyramidal earth mound in Europe. It's about, depends upon who you talk to as the archaeologist, around about 2,500 years old. And Avebury, which I think is in on your list there, is the largest monolithic stone circle site, and again, that's right in the center of the activity. When we started to get reports from the United States, they were coming from Indian burial grounds. So yes, that is a correlation. It's as if, and maybe I'm kind of jumping a little bit out of the frame here, a little bit, but it nonetheless has a connection to your point and your question, because in looking at these hotspots, for me it speaks to some kind of stargate or interface, some kind of chakra point, you might say. If you accept the Earth as a living organism, the Gaia theory, that as any life living entity, there are tendrils that connect us to essentials that allow us to live. You know, we can talk about the correlation of that in many ways, inside the human frame or outside of it. But here we have a planet on which, at specific places, very strange phenomena occurs. And many of them are referred to in this book. And yes, indeed, water is one major correlation in the early data. And the second was archaeological sites, as if we're getting a repeat, perhaps, around the Stonehenge area in particular, of something that occurred before, which they may well have placed those stones in the same dimensions and ratios as those early crop circles. They are repeats and shadows of Stonehenge itself and its construction. So you actually touch upon a very potentially significant point there.
Blake, I know you had a question. Go ahead, Blake.
Yes, Mr. Colin-Andrews, in regards to the crop circles and their, development, their construction, their design, what separates the obvious hoax from the ones that you're claiming that are the real deal, that it's pretty much impossible for a human to make it in this short of amount of time? What's the scientific detail that you give in for that statement?
It's a great question, and I think we need another program to answer it. It's the one that gets me. I'm going to tell you exactly what. I'm going to give you an answer, of course.
Third phase of moon.